everyone. I'm Adil. This is Damjan. Nice to see you. So today we're gonna do the second one of our dumb geometry talks, and it's about games and architecture. We're both architects and we both love computer games. We've been actively working within architecture with some sense of computer games as well, or always traveling back and forth, questioning things, questioning the tools that we're using, the kind of models that we're working with, the modes of design, etc. So we thought we'd have a proper conversation tonight or today for you, Damien,
Yeah,
about what this is about, and see how we can, see how we can push this conversation. So I'm
yeah,
going to share my screen. We have some points laid out already as usual, and then we'll just take it from there and see what we can, see what we can work out from there. So yeah, computer games. Yes.
yeah. Super exciting, right?
Have you gotten the PlayStation 5 yet?
Yeah, I got PlayStation 5 and I got the new Xbox. So I'm totally done with like the new generation. I have everything.
Privileged.
Privileged, exactly. This is true. This is true.
I can't get the bloody PlayStation 5 anywhere.
Yeah, it's not in the stars for now, but it's gonna come soon, I think.
Yeah, I can't wait. Demon Souls is out and I can't do anything about it. I can't even watch Bati.
Exactly. Yeah.
Get into.
I mean,
But you
Demon
got
Souls is an interesting kind of rework, right? It's like maybe that's something we can start from is basically looking into the From Software games, which I think we are both really fans of, and I think uh, these are some of the most, to me, to my mind at least, these are some of the most compelling and interesting cultural products of today. I think it's kind of interesting. People talk about TV shows and films, and they try to make a big deal out of it, while there are things like From Software games in the world, which are just incredible instances of culture and of world building and of like aesthetics and these kind of dense convoluted worlds that are really kind of much more resolved than anything that you can see or anything that you can um, kind of observe in any other medium almost. So I think the idea of a medium is kind of very important for me, and also like specifically tied to this idea of maybe From Software and how From Software deals with their own expertise in relation to their own medium.
Yeah, it's really, one of the most striking pieces of culture. I mean, we both have all the books, we both have played all the games pretty much,
Yeah.
besides the new one, because I can't get the bloody PlayStation 5. But one good thing that happened, because I couldn't get the PlayStation 5, I replayed I replayed Dark Souls, I replayed Sekiro, I replayed Bloodborne as well.
Yeah,
And again, it just doesn't get old.
it's true.
The more you look at it, the more you realize the depth of attention that these people have put into it, and also how starkly it it differs from most other games, from pretty much 99% of other games. So
Yeah.
it's a different sense of what it means to play a game. And
I
then
mean, I read somewhere that Hidetaka Miyazaki, who is like the director in From Software, he's the main creative mind, or let's say driver behind these games, and he was talking about his influences and about what kind of drives his thinking process, and this idea of producing a role playing game, an RPG, that is not directing a player in a kind of an overt manner, right? And basically relying on this idea of non-verbal storytelling, kind of environmental storytelling, where the world itself becomes kind of how you can start identifying clues, and you can start understanding what is happening through the world and through the characters and through objects, rather than through the text, right? Because I think this is a really fantastic, and as we would say, like medium specific way to work with something, right? Like they're not going back to the specificity of text, even though there is a text and it's like very dense and very kind of interesting, but they are embedding the story in the actual gameplay and in the actual world making itself. And then the textual component is kind of the last layer, right? That is super nebulous in some ways, super, almost you cannot understand really what's happening. And that's what kind of puts many people off, because they're expecting to see this like super linear story resolved where they understand like what's happening in the world, right? But
Actually, yeah, to think about yeah, this idea of the medium, I think it's and what you said about the text, because I think in From Software games the text is absolutely essential. So there's no
that's
way
right.
you can take it out,
That's right.
and so is the gameplay. Like the mechanics of the game, there you cannot take them out. Absolutely not. The difficulty, you can't take it out. The kind of imagery that is present there, you cannot take it out. The character, the construction of the characters, you cannot take it out. So it all somehow works together. And yeah, I'm not sure if it's purely the idea of a medium being utilized to its utmost potential, because really it's many media, right?
Oh yeah. Oh,
Or many
absolutely.
ways of
What I mean by medium maybe is not in a way that you can, we can think about uh, like one medium, but
Mm.
where this is like Lev Manovic's point about software, that the software is the meta medium that holds many other media, and it kind of subsumes or kind of encapsulates historical mediums in and of itself. It takes cinema, it takes everything else into it, and just like produces a new hybrid. But this is what I mean. I think it's one of the most fascinating examples of that like software based medium of gaming. And people call it a game because you play it and it's interactive, right? But I do think that it's there needs to be maybe another word for it, or another description. That it's not merely a game, as in the same way that like Kurosawa films are not merely films. There is a desire, and there is a artistic kind of expertise in that. And I think this is what makes it kind of transcends into the realm of art, really. And this is what I'm interested in games like that.
Yeah, precisely. There are cultural constructs that play with everything pretty much.
Yes.
And then somehow they bring it together. So there is always a coherence, a very loose and fragile one, but it can play with anything, it seems. You know?
Totally. And not only that, it can hold these different mediums and also regimes of representation together with no problem somehow. It doesn't have to be, if we go beyond, let's say, from software, if you look at like Nintendo games, for example, they don't have problems with colliding any kind of world with any kind of other kind of representation. It becomes this like supercharged like cultural expression where things can happen, and they're not making sense in a traditional way, but they are constructing every like always novel ways of seeing, which I find fascinating. I mean, it's also not a wonder that we're looking mostly on Japanese games at this point,
Even then,
because
it seems it's so striking that okay, so even in terms of media, they're using a multiplicity of those, and then the connections between them are always somehow uh, yeah, very fragile, right? Because they have clashes amongst themselves, they have differences, etc., that you can always discuss. It's It's not really a one-to-one relationship, never. And then these games deploy this idea of lore, which is yeah, which seems very appropriate to this kind of way of thinking, right?
Yeah.
Because then it's precisely these disconnected narratives with these kind of fragile connections of media as well that somehow stitches it together. So they're
Yeah.
really trying to fill these gaps with each other or talk to each other. So what they're doing is really establishing a yeah, very complex communication protocol
Mhm.
between the lore and between these media.
Yeah. Yeah.
This really makes it a proper cultural construct, right?
Totally. But it's a once as you probably know, I mean, from your own work in design, and once you get into it, the minute little constructions and tweakings that you observe in these games are really what's really fascinating about it. It becomes it's clear that there is an expertise out there, and but it's not theorized, which is actually awesome. Like there is no kind of contemporary theorist working on these problems and trying to explain to others like what it all means or something. And that's one part why to me this is so exciting. Like I can read any number of like film criticism today, and they all have like schools of thought, and or they belong to a certain idea of how they think about their subject matter. But for games, it seems like the theory of games is either about like the fundamentals. What is a game, right? Someone like Jasper Jewell wrote a fantastic book on that. Like, what is a game actually, and how do we talk about that? And they talk about interactivity as this very special thing, which I totally agree with. Or they kind of talk about just generally about like political ideas of the image and what happens. I mean, maybe the tradition of like the you know the apparatus theory in film that kind of gets into the game, and then suddenly you're talking about ballistic vision, you know and so forth. But there is no really theory of the simulation, except maybe when we talk about the work of Ian Cheng, and
Right.
like adjacent theories and adjacent kind of people that were trying to write about that, which I think it's super related to what we are talking about.
And even these are somewhat empowerist narratives, right? That try to theorize because then they come from a particular angle, specifically art with Ian Cheng. So not
Yeah.
Ian Cheng himself, but the people talking about it. And then with games, you can go to maximum to Kotaku or the kind of
Yeah.
dark regions of Reddit or something,
Yeah. Yeah.
where
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
might find something interesting. But this gap, it's interesting that it's being filled by people like Vati,
Yes. Yes. That's
so
true.
YouTubers and bloggers and Patreon supported characters who are obsessed with these things. And yeah, this becomes super interesting that this space is being filled by yeah, by characters obsessed with it, and they're really not I don't know what to call them. It's they're 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 not really writers.
Yeah.
They're not really, yeah, I don't even know what he does besides this.
I mean, I find that problem of like what they do, I think, is related to this idea of maybe an essay, which I think is still probably to me is the highest form of writing anyway. Like historically speaking, coming from that kind of history, uh, which is kind of a personal, coming from Michel de Montaigne, for example, the personal observation that doesn't have to be rigorous, that doesn't have to be. I'm not out there to impress like someone who is a gatekeeper for a journal, but I'm writing about what I see, and kind of I'm trying to establish my own framework in a way. So there are many, I think, on YouTube, people working on this like video essay. Vati is one of them, but he's like specifically really always. I would say Vati is always talking from a kind of a diegetic point of view. Like he's inside the subject matter,
Uh-huh.
and he's talking about like let's say like Bloodborne as if we are part of that world, not maybe so much looking at it from the outside and trying to establish like some form of criticism.
All right. Yeah.
But there are others, like I guess mostly in film, that are extra diegetic as well. They're kind of trying to look at it from the outside of the story itself. Like I spoke to my students about this, the difference between like talking about Harry Potter, let's say, from you can talk about Harry Potter from the point of view of Harry Potter, you can say, or you can talk about it from the point of view of J.K. Rowling, who's the writer of the series. Actually, I'm not sure if we should talk about her. She's kind of starting to be problematic too. But
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, or you can take any writer like that. Like there is a difference because I think Vati is to my mind more the Harry Potter kind of inter like in, he's inside the story,
No, absolutely. Yeah.
you know.
No, you're right.
And
Completely.
I think the good criticism, you have to be more like a in and out all the time, and so.
Yeah. So there's still a black hole. Huh?
Oh yeah, and but there was, I mean, there was an interesting text on cyberpunk, which we could talk about too. I mean, I'm
All
not sure if
right. I have not read it, but
I'm not sure if you played cyberpunk actually.
I
I
did.
wanted
I did
I wanted to ask you about that.
for the first few hours, and then I had to quit because it was getting glitchy and problematic. And then I I, I made a decision I will not play it until I can play it well.
Yeah, I totally agree
Yeah,
with that actually.
because it's
I
really I think it's just a stunning piece of work.
yeah, I too. Yeah.
And glitches, I refuse to take them seriously. Like, I mean, they'll fix it. Who cares when? I don't care.
Yeah.
But the kind of work that went into it, it's yeah, it is
It's
stunning, and it's really something I don't think I've seen before.
exactly. People,
It gives me a different sense of what it means to play a game somehow, or
yeah,
talk to people, and
or
yeah,
inhabit a world. I mean, that was for me the main thing. And people will say, "Oh yeah, yeah, we've seen all of this before," but I think that's bullshit. Honestly,
I don't think so.
it's like this is the that level of immersion and that level of kind of specifically like urban style world making. I don't think we ever seen this before, and it's actually incredible. So,
Absolutely. And
but
I
but
think it's, the so there are a few ways how there are plenty of ways how we can how we can throw cyberpunk in the trash.
yeah,
Like you can discuss the kind of retro futurist angle to it. It's nostalgia, or it's not, or this or that. The characters seem like they're from this time, and that seems like it's from that time, and it's just
yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
reproduces a lot of cliches.
Of course, I mean
but
that's
but it
yeah,
yeah, that's the thing. So through the lens of these cliches, you can easily throw it in the trash, right?
yes.
But
If
it's
that's
really
what you
how you put it together. Yeah.
exactly as you say, like, but if that's the thing that you're looking at, then you don't understand games.
Absolutely.
Like you don't understand what you're looking at really. You have not thought about the format. You have not thought about the medium. All you know are kind of previous ways that the world could be structured through a text or through the moving image or something like that. You don't understand that this is not about that. This is about something else. It's about that kind of mode of interacting with the world and being in the world, which is what's working,
Yeah,
what's
and
at work.
that's the crux of the issue, uh, for me at least nowadays, because I am somewhat struggling with it. How interactivity can actually be the thing that differentiates it somehow. So a very kind of horrible example of that would be this. So I played Last of Us 2
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
very
yeah.
recently. Cecilia and I, we played it yeah, through to the end, and then yeah, there are so many moments in it where you realize that you can still control the joystick, but it's just telling you a story that it doesn't matter if you move around or not.
Exactly.
You know? And
Yeah,
then to force a person into moving this stuff around, then that felt a little, yeah, derogatory to me. You know.
I can totally see that, and especially in that game. I also tried to play it, uh, and I played it for maybe a couple of hours, I guess, until the city part was after the city, just the first city part, and then
Right.
we
Yeah.
go to find. So I had so many problems with that game. Like the characters were unlikable, the new characters, and the fact that there is a city. I don't care about that, to be honest. I don't want to be part of some midwestern fantasy about post-apocalypse. I mean, this is to me, this is part of the larger problem with American literary tradition, actually. You know, like because the horizon of that thinking is extremely provincial, right? That's. I had conversations about this with people, and I still have yet to hear like the convincing kind of counter argument. I think American literature is incredibly provincial, actually, and the worldview that is kind of hidden there is really when you compare it to some other like world literature examples like South American or various European or Japanese or anything you take, it's incredibly kind of short-sighted, And I think this is what becomes of these games. They are written by people that come out of these like writing schools or kind of universities in the US, and they kind of get trained in this like extremely marketable way, but eventually it really goes nowhere. It becomes this, they're kind of slamming you over your head with like some concepts that you've seen millions of times before. And it's always about like this grittiness and then some kind of like authentic relation between characters. And there is always like a guitar involved. I mean, come on, people.
Oh yeah,
Like,
that
Jesus.
that was the thing. That bloody guitar in Last of Us.
I
That
mean, seriously.
freaked, freaked out
Now you
completely.
get to play the guitar as Ellie, but Ellie is now super angry. She's an angry young woman because, of course, you know, like that's the limit of their imagination. Of course, she's gonna be an angry young woman. Why is she an angry young woman? I don't care if she's interested in like the opposite sex or her own sex. I don't care about that. But can you write more imaginatively a character?
Yeah.
Can you show us some depth? Can we like how come everything becomes like collapsed into these like identity categories? That's what I don't understand. That's not literature.
Yeah.
And so this is the thing. Like that's why Japanese games are fascinating because I approach them as if they're like alien landscapes,
Yeah.
right? And but then I did research and I understand that this is a country with like 2,000-3,000 years of history, so it's nothing falls from the sky, right? It's kind of embedded in that too. But the way that they kind of design things and embed the world with stories, that's what's really fascinating to me. And the way that they're devoted to this idea of the human condition, even if they're talking about like extraterrestrial forces or whatever. It's always about something that you can understand as being authentic, really authentic, not pretending to be authentic. So,
There,
so
there,
I,
there's some
yeah,
communication established, right?
yeah,
With
yeah, yeah, yeah,
with life. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
At a
This,
profound level, not the ambitions of the Midwest or something. Yeah.
no, exactly. So that's why cyberpunk was also, interesting because it's made by East European guys,
Yeah.
and some of the best science fiction in history is East European. Like Stanislav Lem, he is Polish. If you read some of his work, like Solaris, that's philosophical science fiction. That is not trash that you can just put on Netflix or somewhere, and then it becomes whatever. So
And
it's
then
it's
these don't really work as yeah, as alternate worlds at all. They really work as proxies. So all the characters are proxies to things, they're indexes. And then it's, yeah, somehow it's always, yeah,
It's a registration of what is out there now, which I guess is okay, but that should not be done so overtly. You can't wear that on your sleeve, and say, okay, so this is a comment on our political situation. Of course it is. Everything is a comment. Bloodborne is a comment on that, if you can make it, if you can understand, But like, so that's where The Last of Us fails to me. But I mean, I loved also parts of that game. I'm not entirely against it, and I think I also thought some of the characters were really interesting. The new characters that people really hate, I thought that was kind of an interesting idea to kind of show the story from multiple sides and have like someone you thought was an antagonist become a protagonist of the story, right? And that was like a bold move by, and it feels like they really wanted to do something. The problem is that they were, to my mind, they don't understand that one cannot see that when you're inside of it, when one is subsumed into that culture, right? You cannot see that you're limited by your own kind of culture, and that the fact where you grow up, and where you're formed, and how you think about the world.
no,
So
absolutely. And then the other thing about it is that it becomes, if it is a finished story, if it is such a complete construction already, then it becomes very hard or unreasonable even to make a game out of it. It's really a movie that you somehow can play.
oh
And
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that when we talk about format in the medium, I think that's absolutely the criticism for that game. It's not a game, really. That's a film
yeah,
that you can also. That's why the reason that they're making now a series or something, because it's so easy to do that. It has
yeah.
a,
So
a
come
major
back
audience.
to this earlier idea about interactivity, huh?
Yeah.
Or interaction. That's the one thing that stuck to my mind, that this is what's the crux of the problem, or why games would be different as a domain of thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's one, but then you realize that, okay, it doesn't work that way. So there has to be another way, because it's clearly different. That's the one thing I know. But how it's different, that I'm still not yeah, sure about. Or actually, maybe I can never be sure about that. But it's something that I'm thinking about. What is it that could tilt it in a what makes it different? Yeah? Or what's the importance of that? And then you see, like a game, like any game by From Software, it does it to a level where it's not even a question,
Yeah.
that this is something different than reading a book, or this is something different than watching a movie.
Yeah. I I guess, I mean, the interactivity part has been theorized also before, from by Lev Manovich, for example, even as early as '95, he's talking about how interactivity is that maybe something new that the software regime brought into culture, right? Now the fact now you have an image that you can interact with, you can do something to it, and then you get a feedback, or you get some kind of a, right. And then he also talks about political problems, and then kind of like, the tendency of software to become authoritarian, which is true, right? We've seen this before. So but in games, I think some of the most interesting games are, to me, the ones that are playing with that notion of control, you know and playing of that notion of how you're advancing through the world. And this is where From Software games are so powerful, because they will kick your ass immediately. You will fight a boss after the first opening sequence immediately, and you will understand that you have no idea what you're doing in this world, which is kind of incidentally related to the story, right?
Yeah.
right? So the story becomes about your inadequacy, and you start feeling that from minute one. You're the hollow, you're the outcast, you're someone who cannot get into it, or you're the one armed wolf who betrayed his master, who doesn't have a sword even. And then you're going through the world and you're kind of becoming a little bit better through hardship, through like real hardship. Like we're not talking here about like there are no cheats in From Software games. There is no difficulty slider, right? You have to really work for every part of the victory, right? And then you get good, as they say, you become better. And then once this happens, then you start feeling gratitude. It's very Japanese. It's very to me, this is the essence of it. It's very like pedagogical. Those are pedagogical games to me. I don't know what you
I'm
think
not
about that.
sure if it's pedagogical. I think it's meditative, no?
Yeah, well, at some level, yeah. After a
Because
while.
yeah, the amount of repetitions you have to do, so it's really not being not like being taught something. It's about go and think. You can't do it, go back and think
Yeah,
again.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Redo it, redo
And
it, redo
yeah,
it. Yeah, yeah,
it's
totally.
really about meditating. And then yeah, like bosses took me 50, 60, hundreds
It's
of times.
insane how many times. But then some situations, once you overcome are things that you never forget, and this is the true beauty of that. Like when I first beat Sword Saint Ishin, for example, in Sekiro, I will never forget that moment. That was like this is why we play games. It's like one of those moments where everything else becomes just irrelevant. And you're in this like exalted state almost because you have fought for it, and you have deserved it somehow, right? But also then the story, to come back to this idea of the story, is for you. You understand the story through the lens of your experience that you went through. That's why it makes sense.
Yeah,
That's why it's not about the text, right? It's about that mode of being, which so in that way, I think to me it's much closer to the relation. Is much more between the creators and the audience. Let's say us is much more interesting than if you look at film. In film, the relation between the director and the audience is always like, I have all the power here, and I'm telling you a story that is completely out of your reach, and you have to follow it. You have to start believing in it. Like if you look at like Star Wars, right? Like,
yeah, yeah.
but here you have to go through it yourself, and you have to experience it yourself, and it's partially yours. At least half of it is yours. Like Duchamp would say, like in like the idea of like the work of art, that the work of art is always half from the creator and half from the audience. I think in this case, it's really that's why it's so powerful, because it's a new way of doing exactly that.
Yeah, like but what's the term? Demountable approximation. So it's you can deconstruct it, put it together again, but it still stays somewhat the same, and then again and again and again.
Yeah,
Once
yeah.
done
Well,
it,
I mean, Duchamp would say like the audience completes the work of art, right? And I think that's literally true here, right? I mean, it's also literally true if you watch a movie, you have to finish it, but the transaction, let's say, is it's very different.
yeah,
I think
investment. Yeah,
transaction is different here, and you start having singular personal experiences rather than having only a collective to some degree experience. I mean, I didn't think about this too much. I mean, it's possible also that you get a singular experience also from a film, for sure. But there is something there, I think, maybe.
and
You know,
that's maybe one reason why not to ask this question. So
I
it's
mean, we're just trying to unravel it, I guess,
yeah,
what we like about it. But there are other kinds of games that I think are more about what we do as designers and architects and artists and writers and all of that. I mean, we wanted to talk about that too. Like, what do we like? I think, at least to my, just, I can also talk about this a little bit. To my mind, like, I have two types of games, really. The games that I really like for the gameplay experience, like
Yeah.
Bloodborne, Zelda, you know, Knights of the Old Republic, Planescape Torment, Baldur's Gate, like I have so many of these games. But then I have other games that I like because I literally have used them in my work as precedents. But those are not the games that I would talk about this other way. You know, like I would never talk about Katamari, for example, as a life-changing experience.
Yeah.
But it is a really important kind of game to my mind. Or Gary's Mod, you know Gary's Mod.
Yeah.
Like, Gary's Mod was incredibly influential on the both of us, I think, and Katamari too. And like, also, like, David O'Reilly's Everything is incredibly influential to
Yeah.
how we think.
Forgot to add Katamari.
Yeah. So important. Like, the Sims are so important. I never played the Sims so much, to be honest, but I have studied the Sims a lot, like from many different points of view.
And yeah, these games are really, yeah, they touch the very heart of what we're doing, because they explicate how you would do things, right? And then these other ones are more in the sense of, yeah, they play with it. So it's really the means of construction is really not visible in them, like Bloodborne. You know, how do you
Exactly.
even
You're not
begin
supposed to
in
see the
time?
background. Yeah.
And these games really explicate, like Katamari, Gary's Mod, everything as well, Migakure as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's really about the yeah, the techniques of production. You know?
totally.
And then
That's
the
why I wanted to show a slide, if you don't mind. I can just
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
share a slide from, you just, um, one really fascinating. I started reading a lot of Will Wright's kind of. So let's say it like this: I ordered the manuals to the original Sim City, the original Sim
Ah,
Earth,
really?
right? So, and I'm treating these manuals almost as if they're like works that can be included into cultural debate, you know. So I looked into for example, the Sim Earth is a really interesting game when they try to. It's made like, I think, '98 or something, and he was thinking about how can I simulate an entire planet, and then I ordered a manual of that game on eBay or something, right? And it's fascinating. Like, this manual is
Yeah.
full of like things like, the Gaia hypothesis, right? Which was super popular in the 80s, like this idea. But then the introduction to the manual is written by James Lovelock, who is the originator of the Gaia hypothesis, right? So it was like they took it seriously enough so that they introduced it into the game manual, and it's really, and then the game manual, the last, let's say, 100 pages are about like earth science. You go through, you learn about the layers of the earth, you learn about like the rocks and the atmosphere, because that's kind of part of the game, right? You have to like start controlling these interspersed like parameters. But of course, the model of the game is not entirely scientific. I mean, it's kind of based on heuristics, on some let's say, assumptions, like simple assumptions made about the game, like The Sims, right? It's made through assumptions about how humans behave. It's not entirely scientific. I mean, but it's a model. That's why it's really fascinating for
Well,
for
like,
for
with
architects.
the Sims, it's interesting because it doesn't pretend to even do that, right? So it's
Yeah,
very explicit in the sense of, oh wow, okay.
yeah. Look at that. I was just like super. This software toys is from the introduction to the Sim Earth manual. and
Oh,
and I mean, this is for me, that this was a fundamental thing when I read it. It's like, Sim Earth isn't exactly a game, It's what we call a software toy. Toys, by definition, are more flexible and open-ended than games. So Will Wright had a theory of everything that we are doing almost 30 years ago or something, and we didn't know about it. And he talks about the difference of tennis, which is a game, and a toy, which is a ball, right? And that you can do one thing with tennis and many things with a ball. So
You know what? Before Will Wright, there's also Mr. Johan Huizinga.
yes, yeah. But that was a long time ago, right? I mean, Will Wright literally was working with models through the medium. And that's what's so fascinating about it. It's like, and by the way, this is Simmert in the bottom right corner. Super simple representation, but such a great concept, And he was talking about ecology, and not only talking about it, but modeling it through the game. And you get to interact with this, and you get to learn something about the world through it. I think.
You can test it. You can test it and literally test it.
Literally test it through some kind of modeling procedure and some interaction procedure. So yeah, I find this amazing. And then I looked into The Sims a lot for the AI model, for the way they're modeling people, for example. And it's like a simple needs-based model. You can see it here. Like the little agents, they have needs. They just have needs. But what's fascinating is that the objects have basically the objects are what fulfills the needs of the Sims. So a fridge is programmed basically as this almost like the 2001 monolith, like the object that brings in meaning, because the Sims only have hunger and desire and pure need, right? And it's the objects in the world that kind of bring meaning into the world. It's kind of really amazing, actually. I mean, the way that someone can think like this and actually model that, that's what games can do. And no one is taking this seriously. I mean, not no one. Now we are taking it seriously, and many other people are. But culture is still, especially in design and architecture, like it's about like going back to some primordial forms of drawing or something. While here you have a drawing, you have a simulation, and you have everything working all at once, and it's beautiful and it's smart.
No, this is just the for them to envision it as a cultural project. This is really it for games, that it's always a cultural project.
Always, yeah.
And what I find the best thing about Sims, that I find, is that it's meant as humor. So it does not pretend to be like this. This can be taken easily as a precursor to, I don't know, Facebook or Google or Amazon, right?
Right, exactly.
And it probably works as well.
Yeah.
Sadly. But here it's pure humor, while being aware of the technological apparatuses in place.
Exactly.
So the mechanisms of control, the mechanisms of social engineering, that, they're all here, but deployed in a kind of humorous manner. So really not being on the outside and making fun of things or being parodic about it.
Exactly.
Really using it as
working through it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're totally right. Yeah, I think that's a great observation also. And also what is cool about that is that it's all represented on the screen. That's another thing that games can do, is they can represent their ordering systems and their logics on the screen. You can see the user interface here, right? Which is kind of an external thing. The game characters have no access to it, but you do as a player. But this is, the pictorial universe that is constructed is a collapse of different intentionalities and of different aesthetics too, right? Because the UI is something else. It comes from a different world. It's meant for a different purpose. but it works with the like interdiegetic like thing that happens in the world. And then this is where the politics and the construction of the world is being made visible to you, as you said right now. I think that's what's really fascinating about it. Like I was always fascinated by UI for that reason. UI layer is the text, or is the what is behind. Let's say, what is the visible part of that model that becomes culturally visible, significant, literally, and it becomes part of the image itself. So it's not it's not, you cannot like separate it. That's why if you look at software, you can look at, if you look at Rhino, you can look at its user interface, and it tells you a lot about the values and the ideologies and the politics of architecture. Like it tells you a story, and it's supposed to be invisible, actually, because you're supposed to just start using it and not paying any attention to it anymore. So,
Yeah.
so
So,
yeah.
so I I'm not really convinced about the user interface so much, because I think these are the mechanics of the game.
Mm.
So it's because interface in, for example, something like AutoCAD or Rhino or any other software that most other 3D modeling softwares, at least that we can think of, it's dull and this and that, whatever. But it's about being able to. So it's not about manipulation. It's not about telling a story. It's about being able to work with something, right? So it makes things easy for somebody who doesn't understand things to be able to work with it.
Mm.
But in the case of games, it's not like that, I think, because it is part of the storytelling. So it's really part and parcel of the game. So it is not a layer that is put on to convey a message or to make things understandable.
Right. No, I think you're totally right. But my point is that that's the problem of software, not of games.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
I think software should have that ambition too. It could have that ambition, and it already does if you read it in that from that angle. Because whether we like it or not, it can be read. Rhino interface can be read as a cultural text or cultural construct, let's say. And then you can start asking questions: why is this here? And why does this look like that? And why does it work like this? What is behind this? What is the politics of it? What is the
Okay.
intention? So it's not, this is the only thing I don't, I think we need to be outside of this mode of thinking about software that is like a positivist AutoCAD idea. Oh, it's just a metaphor for your drawing table. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And then after 30 years of don't worry about it, you get Revit, the fully fledged like mothership, Death Star of software that it's going to destroy Alderaan pretty soon, because it's going to become the only way to think about software, while at the same time saying don't worry about it. Who else says don't worry about it? Facebook and Twitter and Google and all of these guys. Oh, don't worry about it. We just
No, this is, yeah, this I agree with Autodesk and Rhino, etc. It's okay, not with Rhino. So that has to do with AutoCAD, right? That it's a simulation of drafting on paper,
right.
and then yeah, that's why they have to have this kind of an interface. But with something like Rhino, this should not happen, right? But then
Well,
on the,
I mean,
yeah, because
let's
AutoCAD is a simulation of, yeah, it's a simulation of something else. So it is proxy to it somehow. But then I'm wondering, at the level of interface, how does it matter what like Microsoft Word looks like, or can that affect your writing or not? Because I don't see
it,
that as a thing.
you're right. You're totally right, but that's only because maybe software designers are not taking that component of the work on board, which is probably going to change with the introduction of AI tools, right? Like when you start having a possibility of writing in a style of Borges, for example, and saying, okay, so transform my text now into a Borges short story by a click of a button. So will there be just a Borges button, or will there be a panel explaining why would that be interesting? I think there should be a panel, and I think there should be a cultural investigation into software. Actually, that's why I'm telling you this. I think people are not taking this seriously enough, and then they kind of keep going with it. And then after many years, they say, "Oh, our tools are looking back at us." They were looking back at you since the beginning, but you didn't know that. You didn't think about it.
Okay, but then okay, and another angle towards the deadpan presentation of the interface.
I like that band. That's pretty cool.
That that
No,
could be seen as an act of generosity as well.
well, like let's say, I mean, and you know this argument that I had from before, like with Rhino, with AutoCAD, with every software, you have a mathematical Cartesian mindset being delivered to you as a closed package, which implies certain modes of thinking about the world and what the world is and where design starts from and what architecture starts with, which is like this idea of the grid, the kind of neutral playing field, the mathematical tools, and the Platonic primitives, the Pythagorean progression from the point to the line to the surface to the volume, the interconnectivity. It's pure. We spoke about this many times, but
Yeah, but so I kind of disagree with you on. So I understand what you're saying. Yeah, of course we've discussed it a billion times, but I don't think that stops you from doing anything.
oh, of
But
course not. No, no,
yeah,
no, definitely.
it's a matter of education
Yeah.
of the person. So it really matters on the person, and then the software, the UI can tell you all kinds of things, but I don't think it would matter then, you know. So I work a lot with Blender. I mean, I've been working with it. It's the worst software. Now
Oh,
it's
yeah.
very good. Now it's very good.
It's getting better. Blender is getting better, I think.
2.7, my God, the worst thing, the worst user interface you can think of. And then I really found that in a way endearing. It's
Okay, that's
it's something coming from a person. That's why I hate Autodesk. It's a bloody corporation. It's doing these things. It's engineering.
I mean, I think hate is a strong word for me. I don't hate any of it. I really like all this software. I think it's pretty cool. But the problem is like, when will philosophers, artists, and designers and architects take part in the construction of that world?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
absolutely.
because and writers and like poets,
Yeah.
I mean, there is a place for going back to. I mean, software was really supposed to be a liberation. Like, no, it wasn't supposed to become this corporate like suit and tie kind of thing that is right now.
No,
But I mean,
I agree with, yeah. To get into the actual mechanics of how we make things, yeah, then it's super essential.
and people are, and then that's the problem. Like, then you get these reactions to what the software is doing, and then you're always one step behind because you have to wait for the next thing. Now the AI, when the AI tools come out, people will also have reactions that will say like, oh, this and that. But what prevents you from looking into it right now when it's being made? Like, it's not crazy to think like that. I think.
Yeah. No,
But yeah.
absolutely. And the thing is, right now, the kind of work that we're seeing with these AI tools is somewhat depressing, and it shows
Absolutely.
the level of disconnect we have, or the pretend that we're too cool to understand it. I
Oh,
don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. I think we should have a different episode for AI. I mean,
Ah, yeah, that's right. Oh
so
yeah,
this is totally something that we're gonna do.
yeah.
But just in terms of, just when it comes to games, and maybe this idea of playfulness and play, I think that's what's really, to me, really interesting about some of these precedents. I treat them as, and I know that you treat them as precedents as well, like games that are opening up novel ways of thinking about space. Katamari was incredibly, for both of us, was very influential. And Gary's mod also for the interactive component, for its ability to produce like ridiculous constructs, and then things that you can do in the world. And
Yeah, from the exquisite corpse to Gary's mom. Yeah,
that's like one-to-one almost.
no, it's really true. Yeah.
Totally.
And what's the? I think I should still keep it in the video. Okay.
Yeah. Let's look.
Ah, did I share the right one? Can you
Yes,
see?
yes. That's the one for sure.
Hmm.
Well, I think another thing that is kind of, yeah, you said, and maybe the point you were trying to also make with the interface was from software games, there is no interface,
Ah, yes.
almost no interface, right? Maybe, and this is really interesting. If you can say more about that.
Yeah. No, it begins in pretty much everyone, but the most explicit one I think was Bloodborne for me. The first screen you come to when you've installed the game and you've started it says move the slider. It's to adjust the brightness. Then it says move the slider where the hunter becomes visible and the beast becomes invisible.
Totally, totally. This is incredible storytelling. This is storytelling already through
And
the
your
through the.
hands start trembling automatically, when you're sliding it because you really want to see it. And yeah, and that's how it starts. And a few other things. For example, the inability to pause a game. That was also interesting to me because that also, when you pause a game, you're out of it, right? You go immediately out of it. And with these From Software games, you're never out of the game, which means that there is no other layer that you can retreat to,
Yeah,
or look
there,
at,
exactly. There is no pause,
which I
when
would
you're.
call the interface. Yeah.
This is a great point. This is a great, but this is, I mean, it's trying. The game is then promoting immersion,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
right? Which is, if you compare that to like Rhino interface, like there is no immersion in Rhino because you can always walk away, come back, and nothing changes. Then there won't be a beast, right? To kind of the loft won't do anything to you. It's just gonna stay there forever.
No,
Uh,
but okay, but then there would be a difference, right? Because one is a constructed piece of fiction, right? And the other is the process of that construction. So it cannot be you cannot suspend disbelief there because it is about the construction of that suspension of disbelief, right?
right.
So that's why I'm kind of
But okay, so let me ask you this. I mean, that's a great point, and I never thought about it like that. But when you said it, I thought about this question: like, what would it take for architectural design to become an experience similar to playing Bloodborne? And do we want something like that? Let's say. Okay, so here's why I'm asking this. Okay, like, uh, as we go right into this kind of platform, uh, present and future, right? The visual material we're exposed to is becoming more and more dense and more immersive, let's say, right? So if you I mean, that's a global condition, right? Like TV shows are becoming more immersive, violent, and kind of crazy. Movies, games. If we look at the process of design as a kind of an activity that's supposed to be somewhat pleasurable, you know, is it crazy to think about a software that can kind of empower that, or enable that? Imagine if you were designing a building with the same intensity the same attention to what's happening as when you're playing Bloodborne or when you're playing a game. Like, I'm thinking about this a lot. I don't know what you think about that.
But you would do that if you're interested in it, right? Because I'm thinking
I
it's
mean,
the kind of immersion you would have is based on your interest in the thing and not based on the kind of tools you're provided with, or yeah, I'm thinking
I mean,
because why should because then okay, but then we're in a conversation about gamifying things.
yeah. Well, I know that's a difficult conversation, because that's like really what I dislike. I
Yeah,
I hate
yeah,
gamification. I
me
think
too. Yeah,
that's like preposterous.
yeah.
But no,
That's
but let's say a totally not, maybe the scenario is not like taking Rhino and gamifying it, but let's say what if the scenario is making a totally new kind of software that would tell you stories about architectural history and thought and mobilize your desire to work in your own way while giving you the tools that are custom, that are kind of made for you, not not
Mhm.
not, not canonical or kind of general or generic. Would that be useful? I mean,
Before I answer this question, there's some background noise, some wind or something.
oh yeah, that's my sorry. It's kind of warm in LA actually. I know it's like minus probably in Switzerland, but
It's buried in snow right now, but
here I need to keep my AC on. But I'm gonna be fine. No worries.
I'm not sure, Damien, about that. You know,
Okay.
because I would, because I can, we can switch tasks. So it's not really architectural design. We can talk about writing. You know, would you want to do that with writing?
Not with writing though. I don't think. Not with writing. I specifically also why I thought maybe that your question about Microsoft Word was maybe to me too much outside of
Ah,
because writing is it kind of depends on the kind of interior, at least how I can intuitively understand it. It depends on the interior world that you have and that you're able to make coherent as a piece of text, and you can write with anything. You don't need a computer. But design is a type of a drawing, at least how I want to understand it. It comes from the history of drawing and thinking through drawing. It's a visual thing, right? That becomes then kind of constrained or this, or not say not constrained, but described through the interface. To how I see Rhino or AutoCAD is when I open it, I see, okay, so this is what they think the activity of drawing is. Yeah, this is what that's how I read the interface. That's what they. So this is what drawing is for them, and some they kind of, it's implied that this is what they think the drawing should be.
yeah.
The idea of drawing should be. So, and that's what I don't think, because the most interesting things about, or let's say the most interesting works of architecture to me are drawings, and this book from Jeffrey Kipnis, The Perfect Acts of Architecture, talks about drawings as a primary medium, a primary expression. So I think it's worth asking, like, what happened was when drawing became mechanized and then kind of computationally described, the visual part didn't go away. It became designed, and that's why I wouldn't compare it to text. Actually, you know, I
I'm trying
mean,
to
yeah,
find yeah, any analogies to it. Because you can also go. We can discuss the pen and the bloody canvas in the same way.
well, it's true. It's true, but I mean, there are established kind of histories for those that were not. I mean, that they were. Yeah, I guess it's true. I mean, if you
You know,
talk
but
about it.
so for me, the interesting thing about your softwares are not about what the others produce through that or what they get out of it. You know, if they customize it,
Hmm.
it's you. You know, so this is a thing for you. So you've made your own
Sure.
scale
Yeah.
and you've made your own ruler. So this is how you do it.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
yeah, in order for that to become interesting as a model of communication, then it needs to be generous, because then it cannot be that you have so it's still a system, right? It's still a closed system that you have created, that there could be some areas that can be changed around with, there are some mechanics you can change, but it's still there, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like playing a game, but then a game for design, everyone is still playing your game, you know. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah. No,
yeah,
I understand that. I understand that.
interesting to put it in yeah, to put it against like something like Rhino, you know? So one
Fair.
is the sheer kind of yeah deadpan deadpanness of something, and the other one is the slapstick. Huh? Would
Yeah.
you appreciate that?
Yeah, or Dada.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
especially that early stuff. But I totally agree with that. And it's not generous enough because it's made by one person who can do a limited.
and no, and it's so any system cannot be generous. It cannot be generous in its own by definition, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
I
yeah.
think this becomes interesting with games, because game as a games, so Bloodborne does not need to be generous, but I think an instrument or a tool for design has to be generous, right? It has to work at the level of a toy, right? Instead of
Exactly.
a yeah,
Exactly. It shouldn't have like only one game inside.
yeah.
Which as you're totally right. The stuff that it has only one game inside, like platform sandbox has like one game inside, and that's it. They're totally
No,
right.
so the real value in that for me is really it's you.
Like
It's the
establishing
you're making it.
exactly. But let's say, does that apply to like Grasshopper, for example? Does Grasshopper have one game inside, and it's not a toy; it's a game?
Absolutely, yeah.
I think so too. And the Grasshopper is actually adopted by people, and also it's a serious piece of software, right? But many people don't. I mean, no one almost, except of us, I guess, discusses it in that way. That it's kind of overly over determining what is being produced,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
now everyone. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
you
now
can.
everyone knows it. Now everyone is like, oh, it's a Grasshopper project, right? And you can say maybe the same for some other things like ZBrush, right? There you can see when you see a ZBrush project. So, but for Rhino, I mean, Rhino is too generic, and it's like AutoCAD. You can draw things there, so it's kind of really a generic tool, as you said. It's so we could say generic equals generous, because but it's still a cultural product. I think I would like to read it as a cultural thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What was I thinking? Hmm, I can't
Yeah, I
remember
mean,
what.
there are other, like in games, there are other. What I also like are some moments where games break immersion. Like we have this, like in Metal Gear Solid. Like famous example is from Metal Gear Solid 2 or 3, I guess. I played this a long time ago. When you're fighting a boss and suddenly you have to leave your controller on the ground, and otherwise you cannot win.
Right. Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know and there is another moment from I think 4, where which I really like, was when this is one of the best moments in gaming ever that I experienced. I'm fighting this boss, right? And then we kind of like back and forth, and at some point the boss uses a specific attack, some kind of rocket or something. And what happens, is that this rocket hits me so hard that my screen goes to black, and there is like a green letters in the upper left corner saying Hideo. You know, it's like PAL. It's like a standard for video. It's like your screen went to. But Hideo is Kojima. Is like the game designer. You know, so it's like one of the best moments. Like it totally, you're not safe. Not only within the world of the game and going back to user interface, but you're being ejected all the way into like the signalization, and like your screen stopped working. That's insane, man. Like that. That's actually when someone is really thinking about their medium and trying to play with stuff on the fundamental level.
Yeah, I just remembered what I wanted to
Uh-huh.
say. You know? So I was thinking yeah, when we were discussing Rhino and then like the other softwares that are there. So what would be, what would be a generous act for for this kind of a situation? What would be a nice thing to do? Because I'm thinking if we produce like an alternative to that, you know then so we produce another software, blah blah blah, and then you design through that. Okay, then somebody else comes along, you produce another one, and it goes on forever, right? So I'm just wondering, is it because that doesn't solve anything. What it does is that, okay, it gives you options a bit more, but if you're an intelligent person, you need to have those options already, right?
Yeah.
So you need to be able to play around many of them, use them as toys and not play their games, but play your own game above them. you know
Right. Right.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. So if that's why I do not mind their interfaces so much, because I'm not there what they're there to give me. I mean, we always discuss this unintended use of software, right?
Yeah. 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 No, exactly. I mean, that's a great point, but you have to know it already to be able to do that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
You know, which to my mind is a bit, you have to become almost a victim to be able to liberate yourself, right? But what if, and this is the problem of in general, these technical systems. Now people are talking, now everyone is an expert on like privacy and stuff, right? But like, where were they in like 2005 when,
Yeah, when things were actually happening.
I mean, right? I mean, no one was actually, I mean, this is the problem. It's like always reacting to something. And then I don't think that can be a serious position for us, honestly. It's just, it sounds incredibly sad, actually. And but I think architecture in general has that problem of like always being late to the party and then flailing. You know, like you had this hilarious stuff happening over this year when people like making amazing um, points about COVID, you know, or politics or what have you. Means nothing. I mean, I think we spoke about this last time. It's just a reaction to something. It's like almost being trained to respond in a certain way. And that's the problem of education, I guess. That's why I'm so interested in education, because I think we can intercept many of these things before they take root, so that we don't have to fight against Facebook in 2000 whatever 14, 15, but we can go back to that, go back in time to Mark Zuckerberg's like Harvard days. That's a joke, but you know what I mean. Yeah. I'm so curious. Like I just wish, imagine if we had a document on how that design process went. That's a fundamental thing. Who came up with notifications? Who came up with likes? Who came up with these things, right? And I think we have the chance now with AI, because there will be a new. I predict. I mean, I can see the future now, but I think there will be new tools. I think there will be new tools for design coming, and I'm actually working on some of those, and I think that you are too.
Yeah.
We are working on new tools, and I think it's fair to have a conversation around what is being represented.
And For me, really, that's the crux of the conversation. If you do develop a tool, how generous it can be.
Totally.
If I'm making it for myself, or if I really become an architect, then I have to have a client, right?
Well, it's a for me the issue is design. The issue is how we design something. Like do we do we have an idea? Like if you look at some of the new like models like DALI or GPT-3, right? Like what how will that be filtered through the visual interface? Because it will be, right? I'm really curious about that because those will be the things that define how people think.
But you know what? I don't think really, because it's happening right now, and we are the people who are looking at it. And this is exactly what we showed discomfort with, that architects will only engage with it when it becomes a tool. you know so so to have an understanding of things that are happening right now, they will never be an interface, because that is only established for the layman, or for the people who have to come after. And yeah, like how we looked at Rhino the first time. So the development period was gone already. It was already like 25th or something. I don't know which, 6. Yeah, now it's 6, but
Yeah, yeah,
before,
yeah.
yeah, it doesn't matter.
They
So
now
now,
have Rhino 7. Do you know?
huh? Rhino
There's
7?
Rhino 7 now.
I don't know.
It has stories, Rhino stories. Like, I'm joking, but there is Rhino 7,
Oh,
definitely.
okay. No, but that's the thing. So Rhino 0.5 are where we're at, in terms of this DALI, Wally, whatever it's called, this
Yeah, yeah,
all
yeah,
AI stuff. So
exactly.
as people who want to engage with technology at its level, we won't have an interface, man. You know, we can only build it for others. But
Exactly.
like for example, the kind of you see these drawings from, like, yeah, AA stuff in the very early 90s, with these badly pixelated drawings with no anti-aliasing and this and that, and then
Mhm.
just code displayed on the thing, on the screen, and that was a proper drawing. And then you move a bit further, and then these Rhino connections, they become fetishized because people feel like they are doing the real thing.
Exactly.
Whereas they're only interacting, yeah, they're looking at the interface only, whereas these people had the actual mechanics going for them, and they understood things.
But I totally understand that, and it's true. And I think that's where we want to be anyway. We want to be able to construct these things. And then the difference, I think, this time will be that we will publish uh, those constructions as a cultural project so
Yeah,
that
that's,
it,
yeah.
it can be understood as a piece of culture and not as something that you can take for granted for many years and then complain, after, like we have right now. So I think the biggest to me, like something that is kind of unfortunate is that Bob McNeil never decided to publish a book on how Rhino was made, for example, or anyone really from, or even uh, you know Daniel Rotten, right? He's the grasshopper
Okay.
inventor, and I think that would be amazing. Like if they had an ambition like Ram did, for example, to not only to work on projects and this and that, but to actually put it into culture,
Yeah.
become part of the archive and all that.
Yeah, and I'm sure these would be the discussions they must be having, right?
I'm sure because they were so influential. These are major uh, points in how we think and how we work, and it's become deeply ingrained. It's like that's the
We know
platform.
for sure that games, yeah, we know these conversations through game designers,
Yes,
right?
because they do talk about that.
Yeah,
And
because they see it as a cultural project, and then these guys maybe do not.
precisely, precisely. But it is a cultural project, whether we or they think about it or not, because it's not. It's like presenting you with models for how to think about the world, not only to do something, but to think about the world itself, or to think about space. You know.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, absolutely. So
Totally.
now Jonathan Blow, the guy who
Oh
made
yeah,
everything. Yeah.
I love Jonathan Blow. He's amazing.
And what's the other one? Braid as well, right? He did Braid.
Great,
Or
and the witness. Yeah,
yeah. So
he's
now he's
fantastic.
developing his own language.
Yeah.
You've seen that the programming language.
Yeah. I follow him, and I think he's one of the most important designer minds in the world today. Really, really like. I think he's kind of living inside his own bubble of game design and kind of tools development. But I think what he talks about could be we could really learn from that.
Absolutely. No, and his YouTube channel and the conversations he's having, I think they're straight along these lines of how to put something out there. And
Totally.
that's an interesting move that he made, that he's actually writing a language for
Yes,
how to build these things. It brought,
exactly.
yeah,
But this is another thing. Like he can do that. He's able
yeah,
to.
yeah, absolutely.
That's why. I mean, this becomes a little bit scary for architectural audience because they then see, okay, so this actually is an expertise, right? It's not LARPing. It's not like I'm pretending to be doing stuff. It's actually I can do stuff. This is it. That's another conversation, right? But totally, I totally agree. Jonathan Blow is amazing. I think to be able to, he would be someone I think who might be able to really frame this if he would talk to a cultural, uh, or even a philosopher. If there was someone from philosophy, from kind of that side, being interested in these histories and theories of like how things are made and models, right? And how we think about models. That
Yeah.
that could be
In
amazing.
value. Yeah, absolutely.